Okay, let's unpack a massive challenge facing doctors right now. It's this idea of finding a ticking clock inside a patient's neck.
Right.
We're talking about a potentially dangerous artery blockage, specifically high-grade carotid stenosis, a severe narrowing in one of the main highways that sends blood to the brain.
And here's the core of the clinical tightrope walk. The patient is totally asymptomatic.
They feel fine.
They feel completely fine. They haven't had a stroke. There are no warning signs. So the question becomes, do you risk surgery, which has its own immediate risks, to fix a problem that hasn't even caused a symptom yet? Or do you just manage it with medication and, well, hope for the best?
It's the ultimate risk-reward equation. For decades, the standard was often surgical, go in and physically remove the blockage. But two things have happened over the last 20 years.
A lot has changed.
Surgical options like stenting and endarterectomy have gotten better, yes, but at the same time, medications we use have become incredibly powerful.
That's the key. That rapid improvement in drugs, what we call intensive medical management, or IMM, has just raised the bar for intervention.
Right.
If medication alone is suddenly fantastic at preventing strokes, then any surgery you propose has to be dramatically better to justify the immediate risk of the procedure itself.
So our mission today is to deep dive into the evidence that was really designed to settle this exact debate. We have the results of two huge clinical trials,
Parallel trials.
looking at thousands of patients and asking that precise question. Does adding surgery, either stenting or endarterectomy, offer a real benefit over intensive medical management alone?
And before we jump into the numbers, let's just be super precise about who we're talking about.
Good point.
These sources, they only focus on patients with asymptomatic high-grade carotid stenosis. That means the blockage was 70% or greater.
70%.
So if you've recently had a stroke from that blockage, it's a completely different conversation. This is all about prevention in patients who are currently fine.
All right, let's look at the battlefield these researchers set up. It wasn't just one comparison. It was two massive parallel trials.
Observer blinded.
Right. Across 155 centers in 5 countries. That, to me, suggests the medical community was desperate for some clarity here.
Oh, they absolutely were. And they couldn't just compare IMM to a generic procedure.
Why not?
Because stenting and the traditional surgery endarterectomy, they're just fundamentally different, both in their risk profile and how they physically clear the artery. They had to be tested separately.
Against that same high standard of medical care.
Exactly.
I think the first thing we need to clarify for you listening is, what exactly is IMM, intensive medical management? When we say medication alone, we're not talking about a casual prescription, are we?
No, not at all. And this is the crucial context. Intensive means aggressive. It means multifaceted control. We're talking maximum tolerated doses of statins to lower cholesterol.
Radically lower it.
Radically. And we're talking tight blood pressure control, often with multiple drugs, plus things like aspirin.
So the control group is already getting world-class pharmaceutical care. That's the high bar.
Precisely. Now, for the trials themselves, they randomized over 2,400 patients. In the stenting trial, about 1,200 patients were randomized to either IMM alone or stenting plus IMM.
And the other one?
And in the parallel endarterectomy trial, another 1,200 or so were randomized to either IMM alone or carotid endarterectomy. We'll just call it CEA plus IMM.
Okay, that structure gives us 2 really clean control groups to benchmark against. But let's get into the main hurdle, which is the outcome they chose. This is where they had to balance the inevitable danger of the procedure against the hope for long-term protection.
Right, and that balancing act, it led to a really a sophisticated composite measure. They defined the primary outcome over 2 distinct, non-overlapping timeframes.
Right.
First, they looked at the short-term risk, any stroke or death from the moment of randomization up to 44 days later. This captures that critical perioperative period.
The immediate danger zone of the intervention itself.
Yes, and that's often the make-or-break moment for deciding if it's worth it.
Sure.
Exactly. But you can't stop there, so they also measured the long-term risk.
Which was defined as?
An ipsilateral ischemic stroke.
Mm-hmm.
So a stroke on the same side as the blockage during the rest of the follow-up, which went up to 4 years.
And they combined these two things?
You combine them. If you had either a short-term procedural problem or a long-term stroke, you failed the primary outcome.
Okay, let's dive into the results. We have to start with the stenting trial because this is where the big headline came from. It's where the data showed a clear, statistically significant benefit.
It really did. So if we look at the 4-year incidence of that composite outcome, the combined risk, The IMM alone group set our high benchmark. Their event rate was about 6% over 4
Just
years.
with medication.
Just with medication.
Yeah.
And remember, for such a severe blockage, that's a pretty low rate to begin with.
6% over 4 years is an incredible performance for medication alone. So how much better did the stenting group need to be to justify all that immediate risk?
Well, they managed to cut that rate by more than half. When patients got stenting plus IMM, that incidence dropped dramatically to about 2.8% at 4 years.
A drop from 6% down to 2.8, that is a powerful difference. And this is where we need to touch on the stats without getting bogged down. The source noted a p-value of 0.02. What does that mean for the patient?
In simple terms, p equals 0.02 means we can be highly confident, a statistical certainty, really, that this wasn't just random luck.
It's a real effect.
It was a real, repeatable effect of the stenting. The addition of stenting offered a statistically superior outcome.
But here's where I think the data gets ethically so complicated and really highlights the decision. That benefit, it didn't come for free. We have to look at that 44-day immediate risk window.
The procedural cost.
Exactly.
That is the critical point. So remember, the IMM alone group in the stenting trial, they had 0 strokes or deaths during that initial 44-day period.
0. Incredibly safe.
0 immediate harm from the medication.
But the moment we added the procedure stenting plus IMM, what happened in those first 44 days?
They experienced 7 strokes and 1 death.
8 severe events.
8 events, all clustered right in the immediate aftermath of the procedure.
So for you listening, you have an intervention that carries a significant immediate risk of causing a stroke or death, but which ultimately gives you a net reduction in stroke risk over the next 4 years. That is the definition of a clinical trade-off.
It is. And the fact that the stenting group was able to overcome those 8 immediate events and still show a significant benefit, it means the reduction in that long-term risk must have been very, very substantial to pay for that upfront cost.
Okay, so now we transition to the parallel trial, comparing IMM to carotid endarterectomy, or CEA.
The traditional surgery.
Yeah, the gold standard traditional approach, literally cutting the plaque out of the artery. Given the clear success of stenting, I imagine a lot of experts expected this time-tested surgery to show similar, maybe even better results.
That was definitely the expectation. But this trial delivered a truly contrasting and I think for many a surprising result.
So what did the numbers show?
Looking at the 4-year incidence in the CEA trial, the IMM alone group, our high benchmark, had an event rate of about 5.3%.
Okay, so again, really effective medical care.
Very effective.
And what did adding the traditional surgery achieve?
The CEA plus IMN group had a 4-year incidence of about 3.7%. So numerically, 3.7% is lower than 5.3%. It's a reduction.
It is lower.
However, the trial found this difference was not deemed a significant benefit.
The difference was too small, or maybe just too inconsistent.
Exactly. The p-value here was 0.24. Remember, p equals 0.02 meant statistical confidence.
Right.
Well, p equals 0.24 means that the difference they saw was likely too small or had too much natural variance to confidently say that the surgery offered a real additional long-term gain over the intensive medication.
So we have 2 different techniques, stenting and CEA both fixing the same blockage, but one achieved a significant benefit and the other just didn't. But let's circle back to that immediate risk data, because I noticed something strange.
What stands out?
The 44-day window for the endarterectomy trial. In the stenting trial, the IMM control group had 0 strokes or deaths. But in this CEA trial, the IMM alone control group recorded 3 strokes in that same period. Why the difference in the control groups? Does that suggest the patient populations were different?
That's a very perceptive question. And it's something experts always look at closely. The sources don't give a definitive answer. But yeah, it suggests the pool of patients in the CEA trial might have been subtly different, maybe slightly higher risk to begin with.
Okay.
3 events versus 0 events in the control groups is a notable difference in that baseline risk.
So if that control group was slightly higher risk, what did the actual CEA surgery cost in the short term?
They had 9 strokes during that 44-day period.
Yeah.
So compared to the baseline risk of 3 strokes in their own control group, CEA added 6 procedural strokes.
This really clarifies things for anyone facing this. Both procedures carried immediate risk, 7 strokes and a death for stenting, 9 strokes for CEA. But only stenting showed a strong enough reduction in long-term risk to earn a net benefit.
Exactly. The traditional surgery, CEA, did not cross that high bar.
And that's the story here.
This is probably the most important clinical finding. In this era of modern medical therapy, The decades-old traditional surgery for this problem failed to significantly justify its risk. The bar for intervention is just higher than it's ever been.
So bringing it all together, what were the two main headline findings the researchers wanted everyone to take away from these, almost 2,500 patients?
They drew two very clear conclusions. First, for patients with high-grade asymptomatic stenosis, adding stenting led to a lower risk of that combined outcome, the short-term risk or the long-term stroke, than intensive medical management alone.
Stenting works. And the second conclusion?
The second one directly addresses that older procedure. Carotid endarterectomy, or CEA, did not lead to a significant long-term benefit when added to intensive medical management.
This study is just a major victory for evidence-based medicine. It really differentiates between two common strategies, but we can't let go of that trade-off with stenting.
No. Yeah.
You are accepting a clear upfront risk, those 7 strokes and 1 death, for the promise of long-term prevention. That has to be a very difficult conversation for a doctor to have with a patient who feels perfectly healthy.
It's a profound conversation. But the data shows the subsequent protection from stenting was substantial enough to overcome that cost and provide a significant net benefit over 4 years. It underscores that while IMM is a fantastic baseline, revascularization can still provide a needed layer of protection.
I think the biggest takeaway for you, the listener, is just understanding the sheer effectiveness of that baseline intensive medical management.
Absolutely.
The control groups managed only by drugs had 4-year stroke rates of only 6% and 5.3%.
That 5 to 6% rate is remarkably low for this level of blockage. The sources affirm that IMM is a highly effective, low-risk place to start. The challenge now isn't if we should intervene, but which intervention to use and for whom.
And now we have clear evidence. Stenting works with IMM. Traditional CEA in this setting doesn't show the needed advantage.
Right.
The days of just assuming surgery is always better when you find a blockage are clearly over, especially when the patient is asymptomatic.
Precisely. And this leads us to a final thought for you to consider. Based on this data, we know the success of stenting came despite that immediate procedural risk, those strokes and death in the first 44 days.
Right.
So what if, in the next 5 years, medical therapies get even better? What if they drive that baseline IMM event rate even lower, say, down to 3 or 4%?
Okay.
What future variables or what patient characteristics might eventually tip the scales back toward just using medical management alone, making even stenting small, immediate risk unacceptable for most people?
The target is always moving, and the bar for intervention just keeps getting higher. That's a deep dive for another day.